Representative Epps.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I had occasion to hear this bill in committee, and I was able, through layers of mental gymnastics, to talk myself into a yes, particularly because of the representatives from my House district who came. They're folks who were not Black and were there in support of the bill. And one of the folks who testified, I asked her directly, how is this going to work? How is this going to help? And she was quite direct in saying she couldn't see how it would. Her answer was refreshing because it made me think that there might be space to support this bill even for a person like me who doesn't agree with the things that underlie it. I need to walk through those today because I will be asked about why I'm a no on this bill, and I want it to be on the record, and I don't want to talk on thirds. I am tired of auditioning for my humanity. I am tired of bringing together commissions and task forces and work groups and study groups that are designed as if the but-for factor keeping us from being treated properly is we just haven't pulled together the data to prove that we deserve equity. That's what it feels like to me. I'm over it. The very structure of this bill tells us that we already know the answers. And the bill is positioned to ask if the state of Colorado is at fault. If you think the state of Colorado is at fault for enacting harms to Black and brown folks, to Black folks, why are you asking the state of Colorado to be the arbiter of deciding those? It's like when the CIA investigated itself and found out, nope, we didn't have anything to do with the crack trade. Maybe they didn't. I'm tired also of having to give the disclaimer about being aligned with the values of this. This bill was one of the bills, there's no way anyone would remember this, but it was one of the bills that the speaker mentioned on day one when we came together. And I braced because I could already hear it when she celebrated its eventual passage, that we would be able to check a box and said we did something for the Negroes, we did something for the Black folks by authorizing this study. Y'all, we don't need another study. Every area that's addressed in this bill has been studied. It also doesn't need to be, I'd be okay with the shorter title being the Black Equity Bill or something like that. It hasn't moved too quickly. This bill has been properly stakeholdered, properly brought together. But it nags at me as a Black woman that words are deployed and weaponized against me by saying things about calls for solidarity as if we are unified or monolithic in this body. Black folks are no more monolithic and homogenous and like-thinking than any other group. We share a concern for our folks and very much a desire to be free, but I'm tired of auditioning for my humanity, and I don't want another bill that kicks the can and says maybe if we package the data up really good this time, they'll believe us, that our communities are over-policed, that our schools are underfunded, that our healthcare systems are underfunded. The absence of attaching action steps to this bill is maddening. It is maddening. It gives those of us in this body too much of an opportunity, well-meaning folks, to say we did something for Black and brown folks when we're doing what is being directed by overwhelmingly that talented 10th. I know someone knows here about that, the talented 10th. Y'all, I want to say this gently. I have a couple of principles about when I'll vote no on a bill, even if I might want to, but there's some thresholds that have to be passed. One for me is if I've asked specific questions of advocates, ones that are answerable, not esoteric, argumentative, rhetorical ones, and I can't get them answered, then I stay in a no position. One of those questions was, what is the point logistically? Do we need to authorize History Colorado, setting aside the gifts and grants, donations versus state funding? Why do we need to do this? It could very well be the case, because I didn't know that you need to authorize History Colorado to undertake something, but right? Told that that wasn't the case. So why are we asking for the imprimatur? Why are we asking for the stamp of approval for the state to let us spend our own money to prove that we have been harmed by the state. I can't wrap my mind around it. I want to say this gently. A lot of really important work went into this, as is the case with so much legislation. But a lot of the work was the work that represents, I heard sponsors and other proponents of the bill talk today about all voices being heard. What I'm about to say is not at all a feature of the Black community alone, but where I come from, all my skin folk ain't kinfolk. Just because we share certain demographic experiences, demographic identities, and have had common experiences, doesn't mean that we share commitment to the same strategy. I invite you to reject a notion that if you vote no on this bill, you are necessarily against Black people. You might be. You might be. But that's not indicative of that. Nor does it mean, and this is much more important, that if you vote yes, you have done your duty for racial justice this year. The status quo is way too comfortable with this bill, y'all. If you look on the Secretary of State website, you will see what I think is the longest list of supporters, but no opposition on any bill I've ever seen, as someone who's been watching this since about 2015. Page after page after page of supporters, no opposition. That is a good thing until you start to look a little closer. Some of the folks in support should be more uncomfortable with this, because some of the folks in support should be asked to write a check. Some of the folks in support are responsible, a particular group that's in the nonprofit industrial complex had a lot of nerve being listed as a support when they are the ones who have caused so much of this harm. If I've learned just a couple things in my time here, one of them that I will take forward, moving forward, is when I watch other legislative bodies, be they at the state level or federal, I will note to not read too much into any one vote unless and until I've had the opportunity to ask someone about that vote. Because there will be folks who vote no on this bill and will be told that they are racist. They might be, or not, but this bill isn't indicative of that. And there are people who are actively pursuing legislation that we have already demonstrated to you, because the studies have been done, that you're over-policing and you're, whether it's distracted driving or other things that are harmful to our community, will vote yes on this and think they've done a good thing for the Blacks. And on behalf of my little segment of the Blacks who is tired of studies, no thank you. I wish we had a world where we could share these differing views, intra-community and otherwise, and not have our Blackness up for debate or display, and that's what happens. I'm telling you from personal experience that when you're the Black woman who says, I don't want this thing, your own legitimacy is questioned. This is a bill where my plan had been for months to just happen to be off the floor and accidentally be excused because I couldn't vote no, and be voting no, and all the other no's be folks who we are not aligned on a lot of issues. But my time in this chamber is too short for me to cower under what I've been told is the way to be a Black woman in this space. The asks for solidarity, it turns out they're not mutual. I need to talk for just a second. I'm so glad the chair hasn't said anything about the chatter because I really love it. Continue your conversations if it's up to me. Wait, that backfired. But I mean it. I don't need folks to be hearing me directly in this moment. But I need to acknowledge that it's May 2nd. And some folks in this chamber will remember what happened on May 2nd of this year. A representative from Evergreen and another from Denver, maybe 2 or 3 others from Denver, from Adams County. We still haven't stopped getting, I still haven't stopped getting, I'll speak for myself, the violent calls and threats that started on May 2nd when colleagues lied on us, weaponized our identity against us. On a day where in this chamber, black and brown women, black women, and others talk about protecting whistleblowers, I'm sitting back there like, is this real? Is this body talking about protecting whistleblowers? And so when we look at a bill that is ostensibly a study about racial equity, all of its goals are exactly on point, are exactly right. But when do we get tired of asking folks to do another academic deep dive into racism? If you don't know by now, I care about you enough to not sing the old Negro spiritual that comes after the line, if you don't know by now. Somebody over here is singing it, and I appreciate it. I appreciate it. A sponsor asked in committee, in State Affairs on this bill, I have just a few more thoughts. What was the harm? I thought it was a fair question they asked me because they knew I didn't support this bill. What was the harm of just doing it? I thought that was a fair question, and I spent more time thinking about the answer. I don't see this as neutral. I do think there is harm, and it's not harm about, oh, we're just taking care of one group. Whoever, my colleague who was asking about other groups, y'all, we can do a group every day. I'm down for that. We can study a different group every day. But the potential harm is that we just kick the can. The good liberals get a chance to pat themselves on the backs and say we did something. There need to be action steps attached. There needs to be remediation required. People need to be written checks. If the harm is measurable, then the repair needs to be objective and measurable as well. I'm not going to, I don't participate in that rhetorical ploy of sort of asking the sponsor a question right now and expecting them. I'm not entitled to their time or their energy or attention. But I invite anyone to let me know the answer to the outstanding question I still have, which is, since community is paying, which I think is problematic, but since community is paying, why is the legislation needed? I don't mean this rhetorically. Why do we need this? We need the things that the bill posits would come next, but that we stop short of asking for. Again, it is perhaps well-meaning and well-intended, but it is really problematic to run legislation that has at its core a premise that if we just showed them objectively what they've done to us, then they would care. Then we could run new bills. My colleague stood here and talked about the need for policies that address racial equity. Yes, but this isn't one. I root against myself all the time in this chamber, hoping to be wrong. I hope to be wrong. I hope this passes and some light bulb, is a lid above Colorado, and it's finally the time that now we believe that little black boys in third grade who are fidgety get diagnosed instead of disciplined, right? Or the other way around. Now we believe that it's not just coincidence that certain factories are put in our neighborhoods and roads, what's the verb for a road? Roads.
While you're thinking about that, Rep. Epps, I'm going to ask the members to keep their voices down, please.
Fair
it's
enough.
Getting really loud. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want it to be the case that this passes. And then finally, not just people are convinced, but the gatekeepers. Gatekeepers love bills like this. We're looking into it. We'll get back to you. We'll check and see if your communities have been over-policed. We'll look into it and see, were you really denied educational opportunities because of your race? And that when that happens, someone will start writing checks. I don't see it. And no one has even been able to give me a compelling argument to tell me how it would get there. I did not have on my, this decade of my life bingo card that coming to such a respectability establishment type, institution as this would be a thing that radicalized me. But to be here and see what we are willing to settle for is maddening. It is maddening. Black folks like me, queer and indigenous black girls from the American South who didn't get out, who didn't have some of the lucky breaks I had, are fighting battles so much greater and so much heavier than the ones we have here. And I feel guilty and complicit in our own oppression to be signing off on something that just asks us to investigate it again. I'm thankful particularly for the House District 6 members who came to testify. As I mentioned, they were white folks who were doing reparative work, who are looking into reparations and other ways of making amends for their own family's complicity in the harms that a study like this would seek to study. But we've already done the studies. That's how we know we need to study. I'm thankful for them. I'm thankful for them letting me use their testimony as a reason to talk myself into a yes at committee. This isn't about me, and yet you have to know it does not feel good to not be able to vote yes on the bill that's supposed to be for you. But me and my folks and the folks I came from, the hex-throwing goons that were in my bloodline, are tired of studies. I mentioned how thorough the list of supporters are on the Secretary of State website. I'm sure there are other bills that have had more supporters. I just haven't seen them. And such a wide variety of impressive, hardworking organizations that do great work in this community.
Excuse me, Representative Epps. Members, please keep your voices down or take your conversations off the floor. Please continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I also mentioned that in that list are some names who I think are some problematic actors, in that I think they should be writing checks and not signing on to bills that let them pat themselves on the back and say they've done a thing. I don't know if respectability politics is a phrase that is that just ours? Okay, you can Google it. If the context clues don't give it to you. Respectability politics, this idea that you pull your pants up, not because you need to just have your pants up, but because then they'll treat you like a man and not a boy. Right? Respectability politics is if your diction is crisper, if you learn English their way, if you can recite Shakespeare, if you do these things to prove yourself, then you can be treated like the man or the woman, the human you are. And there's a newer school of thought, which is where I am at this point in my life, that is tired of the respectability politics because it's never saved me. And it's never saved my folks. And if this study was demanding the state of Colorado to put its money where that proverbial mouth is, then I would be about it. We're letting folks off too easy. Respectfully, I don't know if it's going to be bipartisan or not, but in terms of the Democrats in this chamber, I'd like to see you vote no if it just asks for a small allocation to contribute, 10% as a tithe. But to ask for no money. We are asking, this is a little bit like internships in college, right? You pay for the privilege of working for free? I can't get it. Sorry to any interns who are okay with your financial scheme right now, but you're paying to work. You are paying tuition to come and work. Think through that. But this study is us in community asking the state of Colorado to let us use our own money to pay for a study to show you how you've harmed us, and then maybe, just maybe, I don't know what comes after. I mean it when I say I root against myself and I hope I'm wrong. It doesn't happen often, but when I'm wrong, they're doozies. They're big ones. It doesn't happen a whole lot, but they are consistently pretty major. And I want to be wrong. I want to see that this passes, and I'll be the first one to say, look at this harm that is being repaired. Because there's good work that happens here, and the good work is evidenced by the portrait of the man who's above me. I don't know if our friends at the Colorado Channel can pan out and show it. but the man above me, but also my presence here. My presence here, our caucus's presence here. I think the largest black caucus in history. And the largest black caucus in history, I think we have a responsibility to make folks a little less comfortable than they are right now with this bill. Write a check. It is taking everything in me to not quote my favorite basketball player right now, but cut the check. Otherwise, if it doesn't come with resources, and it doesn't come with excess, and it doesn't come with solidarity for all black people, including the rowdy, fidgety, question-asking girl in the back who wants to know, why are we doing this? If it's not for her too, then I don't want it. The last potential downside, I mentioned kicking the can. I really like the direction of this bill pre-session. But it has nagged at me since January 10th and how it was talked about in the media and by legislators on January 10th. Certain folks were already concluding that this was all they had to do for us. I didn't come here for that. I came here to take all my things and to help facilitate a space where you could do the same. In that speech on January 10th, and I went back and listened to make sure I didn't misremember. If you ever work in this building, I promise you there's a level of gaslighting. You doubt yourself about is up, is down, down. I didn't misremember. The line that got the biggest applause on that day was the line about this study. And I asked some folks whose judgment I trust, tell me why you are happy about it. Make me happy about it. Make me able to vote for it too, so I don't have to explain, as the black lady, why I don't support the black people bill. And the answers that they gave me reflected that they didn't know what the bill did. They thought it did another step. They thought it came with an action step. They thought recommendations would have some weight. They thought the state was paying for it. These are reasonable things to conclude, because otherwise, why are we doing it? And I did have the presence of mind to not disabuse them in that moment of that notion, because I was optimistic that it would happen. We make so many compromises. Here, I don't mean just black folks. I mean us as individuals, we as individuals, us as individuals, each of us. And I hope that those compromises should be, I'll assert that those compromises need to be compromises of strategy, not compromising on principles. And I'll end, as I began, by saying that one of my principles remains, I'm done auditioning for my humanity. Let me be very clear. The complement corollary, the associated statement is not the case that anybody else who supports this bill is auditioning. That's how I feel. In a world in which I keep a ridiculous log standing back there of random things. It's just how I work. And one of them is certain things that are said at the well, certain things that are said. Only a black woman has ever been told in this chamber since I've been here to stop yelling. Moments like this, that for me attached to, is this study gonna help? Is this study gonna help my colleagues see me as more than the thing she's scared of? So when I say I'm done auditioning, don't misinterpret that as that someone else is. I was quoted in the paper on another issue as saying, I'm not shucking and jiving. I'm not. But that doesn't mean someone who disagrees with me on policy is. There's not just one way to be black. I grew up in the American South, and before moving here, every state I lived in fought, and to be clear, fought hard to retain chattel slavery and against integration. Fought hard. I went to school in Slaughter Hall. I went to school in classrooms named after the men who fought to keep Virginia schools segregated I'm looking at a colleague who also went to a college in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Why I mention that, y'all, is at my very fancy, very overpriced law school, where the classrooms were named after the men, and they were all men then, who fought to keep Virginia's schools segregated. There came a time where people were passing around a petition to change the names of the classrooms. One thing about me, I love a good petition. I cringe waiting if people ever find out some of the ones I've signed. If you're collecting signatures, I like it. But they wanted to change the name of the classrooms, not because I love this, not because the men fought to keep segregation. They fought to change the classrooms because those lawyers were losers. They didn't even win their cases. So to come from that space where I'm taught the law and taught how to analyze and taught that I probably don't belong, but if I'm loud enough and stubborn enough, I might keep my place anyway, where we studied the studies. And I come west because migration is a human right and no person is illegal. And when I come west with my family to have better, safer opportunities as a black woman, ones that have now been foreclosed in the American South, to get here and find out that we're still supposed to study the things we already know, it's a bridge too far. I don't think it is likely that I can have said what I've said without folks taking it personally. I hope I'm wrong about that. There's not just one way to be any of the things we are. And while I'm a no on this bill, I'm a yes on a future version of this that asks for the money that should be attached to it, that forces the state to pay. We have money for any and everything we prioritize. I'm a yes on a version of this that has an action step. I'm a yes on a version of this that forces incorporation of looking at things through a disability justice and racial justice lens at every turn. As much as I don't think that there are many occasions where we need more commissions and studies, I think about there's a young person, a recent graduate, who testified at committee, a black person, young, who testified as neutral. I suspect he might hear this today. I know he will, based on the emails he has sent us. And I want you to know I hear you. I hear you. And while some of us have remaining reservations, we reject the notion that if you vote no, you're racist, and if you vote yes, you've checked the box and done your good allyship. It can certainly be a part of allyship. Of course it can. Supporting this bill, of course it can be a part of being an accomplice. But it's not enough. And I look forward to coming to testify and that young man coming back too, and us getting a chance to support a version of this bill that doesn't mean we have to raise our own money to have the privilege to tell folks what you've done to us. I'm a no, but an optimistic one that hopes there's a better version of this in the future.